Welcome to episode 6 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I'm your host, Holden, and I'm here with my co host, Simone. How are you doing today, Simone?
Good.
Right off the bat, we've just gotten done watching the 2013 production of Richard II, which is it's the first installment in the Henriade, which is a series of historical plays that follow the Wars of the Roses as well as the reigns of various kings. Right off the bat, Simone, I'm curious to know what you would rate this production out of 10.
I'll give it a 7
A 7?
out of 10.
And what would you rate the play out of 10 itself? Like aside from the production, now that because we did a little research about it afterwards and we got a taste of what the actual story is like. What would you rate the original play out of 10?
I'll give it a 10.
A 10? Okay, and before we talk about it, I'm just trying to get a gauge in initial impressions. Would you recommend people to watch this particular production of Richard II?
Um, Maybe I look for other plays that are available on the internet.
So,
This one doesn't appeal to me that much that way that it should be.
okay, interesting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so you wouldn't say that this one was a good one to start with. That being said, would you watch another production of Richard II in the future?
Sure, I will if I have the chance to.
Okay, okay. And have you ever heard of the Wars of the Roses before? The historical conflict this is all based on?
No, it's everything. It's just my first time to get exposed to the history of England. I
Okay.
guess.
Have you ever heard of Game of Thrones?
Yes, I do. I saw it some social medias, but I haven't watched any episode of it or any clips about it.
So you've never seen it before?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, the Game of Thrones is actually based off of it's partially based off of the Wars of the Roses. That's the historical um, inspiration for it. So that's kind of how it connects to I guess pop culture these days, and that's why it's relevant. But yeah, it's important to know before we start. This is a historical play. This is one of Shakespeare's histories, and the problem that I found when I sat down to try to analyze this is that when it comes to histories, you need to have the context in order to actually talk about it. So this isn't like one of the comedies or the tragedies where it explores more universal kind of vague themes. I mean, those are still present within this, but there's a lot more that needs to go into a proper analysis of something like this because you need to take into consideration the facts. You need to talk about, and not just that, but you need to talk about the plot of the play itself. Like there are a lot of names to keep track of. There are a lot of different events that you have to have on hand. So we had to do a lot of research for this one, and I'm not sure if this episode's going to be as productive as the other ones were because with the other ones there was enough within the actual play itself to gauge to spark good conversation. Right, we were able to ask good questions about the Taming of the Shrew. We were able to ask good questions about Hamlet, and we got some pretty. I would consider them to be thought-provoking, productive conversations out of those two plays. The difference with this one is that it's part of a greater work overall. This is only the first chapter of that work. The Henriade, however you pronounce it. So it might be a bit more difficult to get into. But because of that, I'm going to start this particular episode of the podcast with a plot summary. So, because we got to lay the ground for everything else that comes after. So, for the next couple minutes or so, I'm just going to explain to you in brief what this play is about, who the characters are, what happens, so on and so forth. So the play begins with two characters, Thomas Mowbray, who is the Duke of Norfolk, and Henry Bolingbroke, who is the Duke of Hereford. Thomas Mowbray, Duke of Norfolk, has been accused by Henry Bolingbroke, Duke of Hereford, of committing treason against the king, Richard II. Mowbray is accused by Bolingbroke of having recklessly and selfishly spent money the king had intended him to put towards assisting the king's soldiers in a war against rebels in Ireland. Uh, Bolingbroke also accuses Mowbray of murdering Bolingbroke's uncle, the Duke of Gloucester. Later, however, it's revealed that Bolingbroke knew that Mowbray didn't have anything to do with Gloucester's murder, therefore suggesting that Bolingbroke planned the whole thing from the very beginning. What that plan was, we'll get into in just a moment. Richard II has them hold a duel to settle their dispute. But right as they're about to begin, he abruptly tells them to stop, then sentences them both to exile from England. Bolingbroke for 6 years, Mowbray for life. Bolingbroke's father, John of Gaunt, dies from the stress of losing his son, and Richard II takes Gaunt's land and money for himself instead of passing it down to Bolingbroke, which elicits criticism from the nobility because Bolingbroke was intended to have it as part of the inheritance. It's his rightful property now that John of Gaunt is no longer among the living. Richard uses this money that he gets from John of Gaunt's inheritance, well, what was supposed to be Bolingbroke's inheritance, to fund the war against Ireland, and tax the commoners, and fine the nobles for crimes their ancestors committed. The nobles then proceed to secretly assist Bolingbroke in returning to England in order to overthrow Richard II. Certain subjects, however, still remain loyal to Richard II, including Bushy, Bagot, Green, and the Duke of Armel, son of the Duke of York, who is a cousin of both Richard and Bolingbroke. When Richard goes to Ireland to oversee the war there, Bolingbroke and the others assemble an army and invade the north coast of England. Bolingbroke kills both Bushy and Green and convinces the Duke of Armel to join him. When Richard returns, Bolingbroke takes back what was rightfully his in his father's inheritance, but also demands the throne as well. Bolingbroke is now Henry IV and has Richard sent as a prisoner to the castle of Pomfret in Pontefract in West Yorkshire, England. Armel and others plan a rebellion against Henry IV, but are caught by York, who reveals his son's treachery to the king. The king makes the choice to ultimately pardon Armel because of his mother, the Duchess of York's many insistent pleas to spare him. The other conspirators, however, are executed. The play ends with a nobleman named Exton going to Pomfret and murdering Richard II. King Henry IV denounces the killing and swears to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to absolve himself of his role in Richard's death, which he ultimately does not do. Shakespeare portrayed, so now we're going to get into like the reason why some things are written the way they are. This isn't a strictly historical, it's not historically accurate at all, these plays. These are written, and because for different reasons there are distortings of facts and whatnot, and I'm about to talk about them, but I just wanted to give you guys, a little preamble to that. So the reason Shakespeare portrays Richard II as an incompetent king is because in this play is because he did not want to offend the sensibilities of Elizabeth I, who was the queen during his lifetime. She was the one ruling England when he was doing all of this, when he was writing and everything. And she was related to Henry IV, so she was in that same royal line. And Henry IV, of course, was the one who took the throne from Richard II. Shakespeare didn't want to make it look as if Henry IV simply deposed Richard II for no good reason, just for power. There had to be, a whole story around it. It had to kind of slant it more in towards Henry IV's favor and make him a little more sympathetic as a character, and so because of that, essentially the play is a bit of Renaissance era political propaganda, and Shakespeare likely would have been executed had he told the historically accurate version of the story, and so that's why he didn't. And also on that same token, the people of the Renaissance era were afraid of instability. Well, the Renaissance era and the Middle Ages, they were worried. They had a lot of anxiety about instability, political instability, societal, religious, existential, whatever, instability of any kind, really. They didn't like the idea that there wasn't a reason for everything that goes on in the universe, as they were still at the time very deeply religious. And to a certain extent, people today are still very much like that, because it is, of course, an innate human fear / anxiety, the meaninglessness of the universe, the randomness of the universe. It's something we all kind of grapple with on a level, at any given point throughout our lives. It's just what it is. That's kind of the downside of our sentience, is that we have to acknowledge that, not everything happens for a reason. Not everything is good, whatever, et cetera, all that. Now, as with regards to some of the real historical facts behind the play, the real Richard II that this play is centered around, is he was actually a pretty good king in certain respects. He actually established truces with both the rebels in Ireland and the French during the Hundred Years' War, which managed to put a temporary stop to the conflict, which is pretty impressive. I mean, it still went on after, but he did that. He managed to. He was pretty diplomatic in that respect. So that has to be said. However, these positive achievements are overlooked in the play because Shakespeare did not want to. He's not trying to portray the situation as it happened. That would be too existentially worrying for audiences, and would also make Queen Elizabeth's ancestor look bad, which he kind of was. This is just how this kind of thing works. This is all about power, and it's that world. It's the world of kings and queens and courts and everything. It's not nice. It's not pleasant. It's about overthrowing people. It's about getting the crown. That's all it is. It's not. Nothing's fair in. This isn't love and war, but nothing's fair in when it comes to matters of power like this. This is serious stuff. Now, as for this particular production itself, it seemed to change a lot of things from the original play. For one, at the very end, instead of the character of the nobleman Exton killing Richard II in the end, it's actually Armel who was in this version of the play. He's portrayed as very loyal, as like some sort of confidant, like basically Richard II's right hand man. He's the one who Richard is constantly trusting because they're cousins. He's like always relying on him for help and stuff and advice. And Armel is suggested to have been the one who kind of was like he was kind of a flatterer. They said a flatterer. So he was implied to have caused Richard II to kind of have the ego that he did at the very beginning. Well, not at the very beginning though, and that's another thing we're going to talk about too, is the inconsistency of his characterization by Shakespeare, because there are he's like a completely different person from scene to scene, and there's a reason for that, but we'll talk about that later. We're just setting this up now. There's a lot to set up with this, as you can tell. This is different. We have to approach this differently because it is a history. And they changed a lot of other things too. They focused a lot on the Queen for some reason, for no reason either. Richard II's wife. It didn't really, personally, I didn't think those scenes really had anything. They weren't really going anywhere. But I mean, they felt the need to include them in this particular production, so there was that aspect of it as well. From a technical perspective, the play was perfect, I would say. The costumes, the lighting, the camera work. They had multiple camera angles and stuff. It was all very. I was going to say above board, but it was very professional. It was very well done. You could tell that they had the money for this. You could tell that this was a production that had class to it. It was up there. It was prestigious. It had prestige, and that's what I liked about it. It had a great cast. David Tennant from Doctor Who, it was played the lead role of Richard II. It had the teacher from A Dance to the Music of Time playing the Duke of York. And it had a lot of people, man. It had a lot of familiar faces. Real actors, too, like real TV and movie actors were playing these roles, so I thought that was neat. And they also had a digital screen, by the way, in the back to show pictures of clouds at times, or thunder, just to help you get into the mood. And then the set pieces themselves were nice as well. And they even had like animatronics or whatever. Like there was one point where the floor lifts open so that you can have this, so they could transition from the set that it was before to the scene in which Richard II is he's in prison at Pomfret, the castle Pomfret. And it was really nice, really nicely done, and I mean they pulled out all the stops for this technically, and so I really enjoyed that. And they even had live music as well. They had a choir, they had trumpet players, they had drummers. It was all great. And from that lens, I think that's how all Shakespeare production should be. Technically, this was a very good production, and I think it should serve as like the template for all productions as far as the technical aspects go. But in terms of how I felt about it personally, I mean, before we get into everything else, I would have to give this one a 7 out of 10, I think. A 7. It's a C play for me. and I don't really know why. I'm kind of confused as to why I feel that way, but I don't, it didn't really leave an impression on me. And I think that kind of has to do with the story, honestly. It's just, this is the start of a really long series of, of plays that are just, it's not really long. I mean, it's a tetralogy, so, you know, it only goes on for, so long, but it's, each play, like, it's part of a huge story. It's part of a huge conflict. It tries to capture this huge conflict, this huge period of history, but at the same time it's like this artistic reimagining of it. It's very complex, and this is only like the tip of the, this is only the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And so I don't really, I didn't find it to be completely self-contained. I didn't think that it was a satisfying work in and of itself, the way something like Taming of the Shrew or Hamlet is. There's a lot that goes unresolved, but at the same time, the things that aren't resolved don't seem very major to me. They don't seem very important. It's like, it's not conventional storytelling. It's not there's nothing to like keep you hooked for next episode, for the next part. Like, there's nothing that you want to see get fixed necessarily. There's nothing like that in this. There aren't these traditional, conventional storytelling beats in this. This is a very erudite work, I would say. This is a very high-minded, aesthetically minded kind of piece of art, and that's also politically influenced. And just, it seems like, again, it seems erudite. That's the first word I can come up with. That's what comes to mind for me. Erudite. It's a very erudite play. It's very hard to penetrate. Let's say. I can't. I'm still really confused about a lot of it. But mostly I'm mostly just confused about the appeal. Like, why was this made? What was the point? Really, I mean, what was supposed to be entertaining about this, and why do people like this, and why is it still popular? Fun fact, actually, though, this is actually, out of all of Shakespeare's plays, this is one of the, if not the, like, least performed, and I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like Shakespeare's made a lot of other better things, I think, and this just, it seems like a very minor work in the canon. And that confuses me because it's part of the Henriade, the Henriade, which is supposed to be this, it's supposed to be this great sweeping historical epic, and I don't really feel that with this. This feels like a very kind of nothing story, and I didn't really come out of it with anything, with any kind of new insight or anything really. It's, and in a way it's disappointing because it makes me, it feels like, to me, this is like the kind of Shakespeare play that people make fun of Shakespeare plays for being, I guess. It was like a stereotypical, it was like a joke almost at times. It was boring. It went on for too long. There were a lot of long-winded speeches by characters who weren't particularly engaging or likable or whatever. There was no real reason to pay attention. I had to force myself to concentrate towards the end, kind of all throughout, but especially towards the end. And I mean, even the quotes that I wrote down they weren't as iconic as some of the other ones, like in Hamlet especially. Like they didn't have that impact that I was hoping to get out of someone, especially Shakespeare. And maybe that's just kind of the problem with having such a legendary reputation. It's like when you are kind of held up as this, you're hailed as this the end all be all of American, or no, not American, sorry. Ooh, big sin there. But no, I meant English. As the father of the modern English language, and like one of the greatest playwrights and storytellers of all time. It's like you got a reputation to hold up, and so you're kind of anything you put out is kind of bound to be disappointing because of just how godlike the critics have made you over the years. That's and the downsides is that I can feel that here. And it sucks. It sucks. This was a Royal Shakespeare Company production with Doctor Who David Tennant playing the lead role, the titular role of Richard II, and I just couldn't seem to get into it. I couldn't click with it. I couldn't connect with it. I didn't really feel much other than boredom, and I kept checking the time as I was watching it, and it's just very disappointing. It's very disheartening as well. It made me feel bad. Like I feel bad coming out of the play. I wish I could appreciate it as much as some other people seem to, but I don't know. It seems useless. It seems, if in all number of ways, it seems like a really pointless production, and I feel bad about that. But that's just the way it is. And I'm going to be honest about it too. I'm not going to try to suck up to Shakespeare just because he is who he is. This was a boring, over bloated play in my opinion, and it was a waste of time. It was a waste of potential, not a waste of time necessarily, but a waste of potential. I don't think it was a waste of time. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was a waste of time, but it was a waste of potential. It seems like the pieces were there, but they just didn't fit together as well as they could have. And maybe that's just this particular production of it. But even when I look at even when I dig into the actual original play itself, like the original story, I don't know. In terms of the original play, I would have to give the play itself, not this production of it, but for the production, I would give a 7 out of 10. The original play, I would also give a 7 out of 10, though. It's like it seems. It feels like the Renaissance era, the Shakespearean equivalent of, like, how today in movies, people make fun of this, but it's like, with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DCEU, the DC, the Detective Comics extended. Expanded, universe, whatever. All these movies and all this modern Hollywood stuff, just this obsession with trying to start these cinematic universes where it's all the same universe and you have all these different characters in the same universe and it's like a giant series and stuff. That's what this feels like. This feels like the first movie in one of those. The first installment it seems like it's trying to establish a cinematic universe. So. That's how it feels to me. If we're going to look at it from a modern perspective, I mean, obviously, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like that all comes from this. I feel like in a way, whether intentionally or knowingly or not, it all kind of comes from things like this. This is just kind of a downside of trying to. But maybe it doesn't come from that. It's complicated. Let me just say this. I think anyone who tries to do this grand sweeping, historical whatever. You got to be careful with it. You got to be careful with these big sweeping saga, epic, whatevers, because you run the risk of having installments that do a lot of setup without being good in and of themselves, and that's kind of how I feel about Richard II. I'm looking forward to seeing the other plays in this. I want to see the middle plays where you're already deep into the conflict of the Wars of the Roses. You already know the characters and everything. Like you're already steeped in what's going on. You don't have any of this setup. You don't have any of this foreshadowing and stuff. You're already just in it. This felt like a really lengthy introduction to a better work. That's how I feel about Richard II, I think, at the end of the day. And we'll get into a little more of the reasons why, but that's just so far, I mean, that's just how I feel about it. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Simone, before we continue?
Yeah, I agree with you. While watching the play adaptation, I'm trying to battle with my sleep. It's somehow boring at some part most of the times, and I didn't get into the story at all. I don't know what's happening. Maybe it's because of the language. I'm not. Uh, I can't get into their conversation because they talk a bit fast and there's no subtitles. So maybe that's maybe subjective. Uh, um, and I'm trying to get into the story. Watching browsing other materials. I'm trying to what is it all about. But the play doesn't give me that sense that the lecture that I just watched that is telling me that there's a great interaction between audience and the actors. I didn't feel that way. Just because I agree with you that the production really good. The the production. I mean, the what's the term for that?
Oh, the technical
The
aspect?
the technical aspects. They really did a good job, but I don't know. They changed the story part. Thanks for reminding me about the last part. I'm really confused about that because I just read that it was Exton, but yeah. Thank you for confirming that it was Ormel. I really thought that it was Ormel. Um, I don't know. I don't. I can feel about. I don't know if I'm just not paying attention to what they're saying. I didn't feel like that there's a war going on or they're about to go into the war or something.
Well,
It doesn't appeal to me that much, and I don't know. I just like to say that it was a too long introduction for a greater kind of works. Uh, I'm just like I don't know if it's okay if I compare it to Hamlet and just go watch or after we getting into the story of it. There's something that it lives inside you, but or makes you articulate more about your thoughts about it. And this one, I don't know. I just and you watch it and you get some ideas about it, and then okay, and it's not that I'm questioning more about it and the intellectual aspect or something. I don't know if I'm using the right terms about it.
yeah, the intellectual aspect, there isn't really one to this play. I mean, there is if you like force there to be one, but it doesn't really make it easy the way Hamlet does. Hamlet's like this. Hamlet's like it's like a universal, like it's like the prototypical meditation on death and bitterness and revenge. And this has, I don't, it has the pieces. Like I said, it has the pieces to setting up like maybe a better version of that kind of whatever later. But this particular play just isn't that. Richard II just isn't that for me. It's not about like I don't get the and I have a few theories about this. I mean, I'm not going to profess to be an expert in this stuff at all. I mean, we're watching this as laymen. We're watching this as kind of casual viewers who are just trying to get a taste for Shakespeare for the first time. But my theory on this is that this play was made for the elite. This is a play. This was a play that was like commissioned. I'm pretty sure, and I think I read this somewhere. But take this all with a grain of salt. But it's like I'm pretty sure this play was made for the Queen and everything, and like it was a small affair even in Shakespeare's lifetime. I think I read somewhere that the people that he had to like pay extra to get people to do it because they just didn't think that it was going to be interesting or relevant even then. So if this play was dated back then like it's really dated now. It's exponentially dated now. I don't know, man. I think and I think every artist, especially when you do something, when you make as much as Shakespeare did in his lifetime, I think you're just going to have you're going to have duds. You're not going to win with everything. Artists are just people. It's like they're not infallible. They're not gods of creation or whatever. There's going to come a time where they make something that just isn't up to par. Just isn't up to snuff. And I think that Richard II is one of those plays. It just hasn't survived. It hasn't lasted. I think the quality of a Richard II production really does. I mean, and you could say this about anything, really, any kind of play, any Shakespeare play, any play in general. But this one really depends on the quality of the actors, the approach that the people working on the particular production of whatever decide to do. What direction they take. What kind of spins they want to put on the story, or if they just go for it, straight up and do it completely, beat by beat, faithfully. Um, this is one of those plays that really depends on those other factors in order to redeem it because the base, the core of it just isn't that engaging. And I think another aspect of to that, going back to what I said about elitist, whatever, elitism or whatever the elites, not, this feels like a very aristocratic play. This is something that like the royals would enjoy, because it's all about intrigue, it's all about court drama and stuff. But it's not. There's nothing really. There's no mainstream appeal. There's no conventional appeal. Let's just say the things that we're used to watching as like I guess normal people have very little in common with this. This isn't, and it's really confusing to talk about this because it's like it inhabits its own thing. It's like a mixture of a bunch of different genres and subgenres, and ways of storytelling. But it's I don't know what it is. It's not quite character study. It's not quite historical drama. It's not quite character study because then you've got because there are too many characters for it to just be all about Richard II. At the same time, it's not quite historical drama because it's not even accurate to what happened. It's like Shakespeare's weird version of reality. So it's not that. Excuse me. At the same time, but then also it's not. It's not really a political drama either because it's more focused on the people themselves You don't really get into like you get into the intrigue, but you don't get into it enough for it to be just a straight up political drama, you know. And just same with the characters, you don't get into them enough for it to be a straight up character study. So I don't really know what it is. I don't know if it's like and I don't know if I'm just missing something or if the pieces just didn't go together well enough. But I don't know. I'm just confused. I'm kind of, and I'm not necessarily confused about the story or anything. Like I get that all perfectly well, but I'm confused as to like, why this was even made. Really, you know, like what the point of this is. You know, I just don't get it. Like I just don't get why people continue to do productions of it. You know, why it wasn't left behind. Why people like it. What is there to like about this? It feels like a lackluster piece of artistic craft. It doesn't seem that good to me, and I want to know like what people get out of it. Like and going back to what you said about the whole notion of audience interaction. The audience I saw, and you know, this is all anecdotal maybe, and this doesn't have anything to do with any of it, but it's like the audience I saw were all like, I mean, it was a bunch of kids for the 2013 production. It was just a bunch of kids, and they all looked like they must have been on like some school trip or something. They all looked bored to death, you know? And I was bored too. I was just bored. It fucking bored the shit out of me. And I just don't know what to make of it, really. Um, I would. I would personally not recommend people to watch this as their first Shakespeare. So to qualify, watch something like Hamlet, you know, first, or watch one of the comedies. You know, watch like Twelfth Night for your first Shakespeare. This seems like late Shakespeare. This is like advanced. You know, this is like once you've explored some of the other, like a lot of the other canon. This is what you come to at the end. This is what you build up to understanding eventually. I think, you know, because I think Shakespeare and plays and opera and all that's what this seems. It seems to be in that range. It seems to embody the acquired tastes. Let's just say. And that's another thing too. Going back to what I said about this being kind of like an erudite elite kind of work. It seems like you need to understand. You need to be able to appreciate. It's like with music theory. You know, it's like with all the classical composers and stuff. Like you need to know how hard it is to make like a Mozart's, you know, or like a Mozart composition or a Beethoven composition. You need to be familiar. You need to familiarize yourself with the technical aspects of it enough to be able to fully appreciate it, you know. And that's kind of how I feel here, because there's a lot of complex language. There's this in the interaction between the audience and the play and the actors and the audience itself. It comes from the language, you know, and the different kinds of language that are employed throughout this, you know, the play, which, you know, it's very complicated, but it's all deliberate, you know. And this to me, this seems like a play that was only. I have a feeling that, you know, this play might have partly only been made as a way for Shakespeare to play around with language. And I'm just, you know, I think I like a lot of people, I'm just not like really into language enough to. Like I'm not like a linguist, you know. I'm not like a huge linguist fan. I don't prioritize linguistics over literature, let's say, or something. Like I think it's great when a perfect work of art for me has everything down good. I don't think you should sacrifice the story or, you know, the characters or, you know, philosophical insight or whatever for just linguistics, for just the language. I don't think that's justifiable in my opinion, because I don't think language is enough, you know. And some people find it cool, and that's fine, but I just don't think it's common. And I don't think it's common because it doesn't really have as much to it, I don't think. And that's just my opinion. You know, you can feel free to disagree with me, you know, all you want, but, you know, that's just how I feel about it. I just don't think I don't think language is very appealing to a lot of people, like especially this kind of, you know, high-minded, very complex language. It's like you got to teach yourself it in order to even understand what the hell's going on. You know, you got to teach yourself it in order to appreciate it. And it's like, you know, if it's not entertaining, then fuck it. You know what I mean? And like, I just don't think I don't know. This doesn't seem like something that's worth the time to teach yourself is the thing. And that's the problem. You know what I mean? Like I can learn all about intrigue and stuff, like royal intrigue and stuff from fucking Game of Thrones if I really wanted to, you know, or anything really. I think it would be more productive to learn about the actual Wars of the Roses, because at least that actually happened. You know, this is like a weird version of it that didn't even happen. You know, it's wrong. It's historically inaccurate. So it's like, what's the point of spending time in this in this world? What do I get out of taking the time to learn about Shakespeare in the Henriade in this regard? What do I get out of it? I don't feel like I get anything. I feel like it's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of time for. I think if anything, just read the Wikipedia articles for this. Listen to some lectures about it. Then you get the historical context compared to Shakespeare's interpretation of it. Interpretation of the facts or whatever. But I feel like this play kind of cancels itself out. And again, it's like you need to have like a maestro's eye for attention to detail when it comes to it. You need to know the craft. And so I don't know. Maybe this is a play for lovers of language. Maybe this is a play for linguists. Maybe this is a play for academics and royalty. But it's certainly not a play for me. And I just can't get into it. And I don't think there's any. But more importantly, more egregiously, I don't think there's any reason for me to get into it. And that's like the worst thing you can do of all, is to bore someone or to make them, because I felt like this was work. I didn't like preparing for this episode of the podcast. It felt like a chore. It felt like schoolwork. It felt like an assignment. And that's not the point of this podcast. That's not the point of doing any of this. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to learn, but you're supposed to have fun along the way. That's kind of the point. It's supposed to be the perfect experience. But this just leans way too far into the erudite and the high-minded, and for no good reason. It doesn't live within you the way Hamlet does. It doesn't. It doesn't inhabit anything like that. It doesn't do that for me at all. And it's just disappointing, because I wanted to like this. I was looking forward to it. I was like, oh boy, Shakespeare's histories. Oh man, I'm going to get into the Henriade. I'm going to learn all about all these kings and everything. It's going to be a hell of a time. And it's like, well, it's nothing like that at all. And maybe that's my expectations clouding my judgment or whatever. Maybe that's wrong on my part or what. Maybe it's not an impure argument for me to. Maybe that's an impure argument for me to bring to the table. But that's just how I feel. Maybe this is a play that's better to read than it is to watch. And I could give you that as well. Like I could give you the benefit of the doubt in that one too. Like if you would make that argument that you make the argument that oh, Richard II, no, that's one that you're supposed to read, because then you can clearly see the metaphors, the verses, the similes, the soliloquies. How Richard acts. How Richard is more plain in this scene, and how Richard is more verbose in this one, more metaphorical, more flowery. And how that depicts him at different stages of his rule, and the different aspects of him as both a leader and a person, as an individual or whatever, this was one of the only Shakespeare plays that are written entirely in verse as opposed to prose. It actually has no prose in it at all whatsoever. The only other plays that are like this are King John and the first and third parts of Henry IV. So, it's interesting. It's interesting. It sounds interesting to me, but it's not interesting enough. It doesn't engage me enough to want to actually go out and go like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna maybe buy a book about this and like learn more. I'm gonna take a class in this when I go back to school. I'm gonna watch some lectures on it. It's like, no, I don't care. Because there's nothing the subject matter itself isn't interesting to me. It's like it's got to be interesting. It's got to be worthwhile. Like it's all fine and good it's like if you write a whole play. It's like if Shakespeare wrote a play about a rock in the sun or something. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. And he spent all this time writing this really complex, masterful language about this rock that's just sitting in the sun, getting hotter as the day goes by. That's fine, but that's all fine and good. Like it's nice if he's able to. It's impressive if he's able to. Like, sure, it's impressive if Shakespeare was able to, to make this really like to have all this beautiful language, about a rock that's just sitting in the sun. But it's like, if it's just a rock in the sun, then I don't give a shit. I'd rather have Shakespeare tell an entertaining story. I'd rather get into the Shakespeare play that's actually fun and entertaining and interesting about death like Hamlet, about revenge like Hamlet, about murder like Macbeth, about identity like Twelfth Night or whatever. I'd rather get into that because that's more interesting to me. It's just better. This is not as good because it's just, and it's like, it's that whole thing. It's like, just because something is erudite, just because something is boring and you have to work for it, it doesn't mean that it's good. It doesn't make it good. It's actually worse because it doesn't engage people. And so it's like whatever Shakespeare had to say, people don't know now. And maybe it wasn't for them. Maybe it was elitist or prestigious or I was going to say pretentious, but maybe it was meant to be reserved for a certain small amount of people. Maybe the lovers of language. Maybe this is what that maybe this is the audience for that. Maybe that's who this is really for. That's fine, but I'm just saying it's probably not as good a work of art in that case. If there's a reason why Hamlet's more popular than Richard II. It's because it actually speaks to people. It actually does an effective job of communicating its ideas and its message and whatever it's trying to say. It does a better job with that than this ever could. So I think this plays a bit self-defeating in that regard. Anything you want to comment on that, Simone, before we move on to talking about, the story itself?
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking earlier that maybe I didn't. It's not my opinion about giving it a 10 out of 10. Maybe the lecture that I just watched and how this play appeals to other people, but you should say that it's erudite, that you need to do a lot of research to understand it. Maybe I rate it because of that. That it affects me, that it appeals to them, but it's not for me. I guess that it's not for me. They say that it could be that it was audience. There's an audience interaction between the actors and the story itself, but there's not much at all. I've been knowing the background of this story, that it just proves that uh, it's not really worth the time to engage to this one. Maybe you should just already say that, maybe get into the real history or the true history that gets behind it, not just this story. I don't know. It doesn't give you a thing at all, or it leaves something in you. Yeah, it's just I just watch it and then that's it. So that's what I feel. I don't know. But maybe it's not a good start. Definitely say, when you're going to engage in Shakespeare, maybe you should check different materials rather than not this one, because maybe it will give you a reason to get bored about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, I feel like people coming to Shakespeare for the first time, they watch this, if they watch this, they'd quit because it's not the right one to start with at all. But we will trudge through anyway. Let us proceed, I suppose. So, what would you say your favorite thing about this production of it was? And what would you say? And then after that, tell me what your least favorite aspect of it was.
Uh, I like the technical aspects of this play.
Right.
I guess, but that's it. I don't know. The play itself, it doesn't appeal to me that much. I don't like the way the actor portrays Richard.
You didn't like David Tennant's performance?
I don't know. He doesn't look like noble at all, or a king at all. But there's a backstory about.
He looks kind of gay, doesn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't look like from a noble or a king at all.
No.
It just I just see he dressed up like with a crown. Without his crown, he's nothing.
Yeah.
Just for me, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
no,
that's okay.
he looks like, I don't know. It was like, to me, it was just some guy. Like, he's just a guy. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. It's like he doesn't have that stately presence that you're supposed to have if you're playing a king. He just seemed like some weird. Like, I don't mean gay in a derogatory term, but it was like, he was just it was just like just some dude. I don't know, some dude who's just like acting. I don't. It's just, that's how I felt about it too. I would agree with you on that, definitely. And I would agree with you on also what my favorite thing and my least favorite aspect of the production was too. I liked the technical aspect. I thought they really went, above and beyond to like make it an immersive experience, and that's why it's disappointing to me. Because like it should have been really good. You had the choir, you had the trumpets, you had really good actors too. I mean, even though, and like and that's the thing too. Like, if we're gonna get into like David Tennant's performance of it and stuff, like I think David Tennant did a good job doing it, but I think the material is just like, it's so unengaging that it pulls you out of everything. Even if you have good actors, even if you have good lighting, set pieces, all this high tech equipment to like make what is supposed to be like the perfect kind of experience, play watching experience. Um, it just it just doesn't work because the story isn't good. The story, the material is just not engaging, and that was my least favorite aspect of it was the story, and that's not good. That's bad. When the subject matter is the worst thing. Um, so uh, I gotta ask you this though. Uh, how come all the black actors were in subservient roles? Did you notice that? Like how there were the only time they had black actors in it were when they were it was like they were always playing some. It was weird. It was kind of fucked up. I thought like they were only playing like the stable boy, the servant, the guards, the queen's handmaid. What did you think about that? That was kind of weird, wasn't it? Did you notice that at all?
And noticed that they didn't have any major roles at all, or any um, great contribution about it, or roles about in the play. I don't know. Maybe it's uh, so. And there's also other people out. The people in the back. I don't know. There's a lot of other actors in the background without significant role in the play. I don't know. They're just there, so they're just the extras. I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. This was like this production had the opposite problem of the other production, where it was like they just kind of put people in for no reason, and there were just a bunch of Hamlet. There was just a bunch of random shit in that one with Benedict Cumberbatch, like the David Bowie shirt and like hipster Horatio and stuff. Didn't make any goddamn sense. Like this one is like weird. It's just weird how like every single black actor is like in a subservient role. It's like kind of fucked up. Like it's just I don't know, man. It's like both sides. Like I don't know, people who made this like fucking racist or something. I'm not gonna say anything else, but it's like it's there. It's definitely there. You have to acknowledge it, and it's weird. It's weird that they didn't not even one major role, and not even just as like and they weren't even like courtiers or noblemen of their own. They were all servants too. Like none of them were nobility. That was what I picked up on. So maybe the woke stuff or whatever. Maybe the opposite is like yeah, it's cringy, but I guess there's a reason for it too. And as recent as 2013, like I don't know, it's just kind of fucked up to me. I don't know. Like maybe that's why people like Hamilton and stuff so much. I can't get into it personally, but like shit, man. Like I noticed that, and it has to be acknowledged. It has to be addressed. But I'm not going to go on a whole tirade about it. I just if you see it, if I see it, I call it out. Just whatever. But anyway, let's not get into that. Let's not go down that rabbit hole this time. Let's talk about the play itself. Let's talk about the story. So in your opinion, Simone, do you think Richard II was a good leader? Do you think he was a good king?
Not at all.
And why do you say
He's
that?
not. Um, um, I don't know. He doesn't seem like a king at all, or any nobility. He's just like a spoiled rat in in the in the castle or something.
A what? Sorry.
A spoiled brat.
Oh, spoiled brat. Oh, okay. And what did he do that was like so bad? Do you think?
I don't know. He's just sitting there. I don't know. He never been. For example, he never been prudent about being about the issues that he needs to tackle, or he rule about, and I don't know. He's just living in some luxuries or something that uh, he doesn't care about being a king at all. I don't know. I can see any aspects of him being a king at all.
Ah, okay. Um, do you think he should have let Bolingbroke and Mowbray duel at the beginning?
Um, uh, that's one of the interesting part of this story. I don't know if this doesn't happen. Um, I can't remember. I will not remember any important things about it. I don't know. That's worth remembering for me. That part. I think that's the only part that I can remember at all.
Oh, really? But do you think he should have let them fight though, or do you think it was a good decision for him to like interrupt them and like exile them instead of letting them fight it out between each other? Because I personally, I don't know. I didn't think it was that bad, honestly, but maybe that's just me. Because I thought, because the duel would have ended with one of them dying anyway, right? So it's like so when he interrupted it and he said like, I'm gonna let you both live, but I'm gonna kick you out of the country for a little bit. One of you for 6 years, one of you forever. Um, you know, I just I thought that was a lot. I thought that was reasonable. I thought that was kind of merciful on his part. Instead of just letting one of them get killed or maybe both of them get killed while fighting, it's like why not just settle the issue more peacefully and diplomatically. That's what I saw in that decision. I mean, but apparently it's not right. Apparently Shakespeare is trying to show you that he was wrong in doing that. What do you think?
I don't know. Even if any other thing, for example, he let them kill each other, so that's wrong. And then, on the other hand, that what's in the reality that happened in the story, that um, he exiled them, but the other one is for for eternity, and then the other one is just for 6 years, I guess. And then I don't know. Both ways are wrong, I guess.
So you think both ways are
Both.
wrong? What would you have done if you were in his position then, as a king? What would you do?
Um, Maybe I'll give a prudent decision about it, or do more some ask more witnesses on what's really happened, and not just by the the people itself that involved in this issue. I guess maybe he get more about on the context what it's really all about.
And for our listeners, what do you mean by prudent exactly? Like, what is your personal definition of prudence in this particular case?
Prudence, I guess.
Here,
He
speak up
shouldn't
a little. Sorry, speak up.
he shouldn't base it on religious or political, on only on the bit. Maybe he should make a decision with this two about being balanced about things.
Ah, okay, balance. So balance is the key, you think?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, I would agree with you on that. Yeah, definitely. But now let's get into it a little more. Why do you think? So do you think his decision to banish them both was fair? Like, do you think that was a fair sentencing? Just banishment from England.
Um, I guess that's a great idea, but given that he wasn't fair at all for giving um, um, lowering his sentence, the sentence of his cousin
Oh,
to 6 years.
Bolingbroke. Yeah.
The other one is for eternity. I guess it's not fair at all, because he just lowered the sentence because of his uncle's words or something. I don't know what's the exact term for that.
Oh, it's please. Right. Yeah. Like, yeah, exactly. It was nepotism. It was blatant nepotism because his father. And if you don't know what nepotism is, it's basically when you get something because you're related to someone. So it's like you could get a job at like a big company because your dad is like the CEO or something. That's what nepotism is basically. That was nepotism there too. His uncle, just because he was related, because the uncle begged him, he took off 4 years from his sentence. It was going to be 10, and then turned it into 6 years. Um, and Mowbray got nothing because he's not really connected to any of them really. He's royalty, but he's not as connected, so it doesn't matter as much to the king anyway, to Richard. And what we were talking about just now, that's going to lead into what I was about to ask you here. Why do you think Richard banished Mowbray for life, but only gave Bolingbroke 6 years away from England? And I think we just explained that, but I was curious to see if you had another interpretation of it, perhaps.
I don't know if it just makes sense that whether I just read that Mowbray know about um, another. I don't know what's. I'm so forgetful about the names. Another Richard's uncle that uncle's dead, so maybe Mowbray will tell the people that Richard is also behind it. Behind it.
Oh, the murder of the Duke of Gloucester, I think, is what you're talking about, right? Gloucester.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he knows something that he's not leading on, and that again, we keep going back, but it goes back to what I was saying about earlier, how you know, basically Shakespeare sets up that Bolingbroke, who becomes Henry IV by the end, had kind of set it all up from the beginning, because he knew that Mowbray didn't actually kill Gloucester. He he just accused him of that so that he could set this all into motion. He was really very Machiavellian, and by Machiavellian I'm referring to the Italian political philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote this book that basically there was like a guide on for princes and kings. It's called The Prince. It's a guide for royalty on how to basically manipulate how to use your power in the best way possible, and that involves a lot of manipulations and intrigue and all that. And that's exactly what's going on here with Bolingbroke. And so, even though Shakespeare wrote the play as kind of a piece of it's not necessarily propaganda, but it was influenced politically by the fact that Elizabeth I was ruling at the time. That did play a role in how things are characterized and everything. He still did portray Bolingbroke as manipulative, as politically savvy, as complex. He's not a good guy, he's not some angel or anything. But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. How at the beginning you do get that. You once you get hindsight, you realize, oh shit, he didn't actually think that Mowbray did kill Gloucester. It was all a setup. It was from the very beginning. It was all a setup, and so it just Henry IV, the clever bastard, kind of a shady figure, but pretty good when it comes to the political game. And I think you need that. You need that shrewdness. You need to be able to know how to manipulate things. You have to play the game in order to get to the top. That's how politics are. They're ruthless. There is no good or bad really. It's just everyone out for themselves. Everyone trying to get to the top of the heap. And that stands as a testament to that. So there is some insight in that regard, but not a whole lot, I wouldn't say. Moving forward, however, now let's talk about Richard II and how Shakespeare characterizes him. So, why do you think, Simone? Why do you think Shakespeare wrote the character of Richard II so inconsistently? And what I mean by this is that in one scene, from scene to scene, he's like a completely different person. In one scene, he seems like a fair and judicious leader. That's up for debate, but that's how I saw it. But then in another, he's like arrogant and elitist and contemptible. And that was the scene where where the Duke of Gaunt has just died, and he's all excited about it, and he's like, let's go shake him clean or whatever. Let's hope that he's dead soon. Or he wasn't dying. He wasn't dead, but he was dying, and he was like, I hope he dies so that I can take all his money, basically. And that was like a completely different person from who he was when he was sentencing them both to exile. But then also by the very end, when he loses everything, Shakespeare decides to depict him as sympathetic. He's lost, broken, betrayed by all his closest allies, almost like a Christ figure. A victim of betrayal and distrust or whatever. Why do you think Shakespeare did that? Why was he so inconsistent with the characterization?
Maybe because he wanted to portray that King Richard is just like just a human being like us. That at the end of the day, even though he's a nobleman, he's still a human being. He's capable of uh, doing things that normal people would do, or he's capable of being human at all. I don't know. Just what he did are so human being. Or I don't know. There's no extension to the rule that when you're noble, you're exempted to be good or kind or whatever any standards at all. So maybe in the end of the day, we are all human beings that we're capable of doing some sinful things or wrong things or bad. Just something like that.
Do you think he's more good than bad or more bad than good?
I guess that he's more bad than good. I know most of his decisions are not really beneficial to the people around him, or it was selfish. I don't know that he's just making decision out of his not being prudent or not thinking about what will happen. And just he just make a decision because he that's the decision that he made, that he doesn't think at all of what would happen after he made that decision. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't have any foresight. He just kind of he's very impulsive and very reckless, and that's kind of perfectly embodied by encapsulated by by what he does with these two. At the beginning, he his decision is very arbitrary. He doesn't seem to have any explanation or rationalization as to why he decides to exile them of all things. He could have made them do, I don't know, maybe like labor or something, or he could have taken away some of their noble ranking or what. But he just straight up exiles them for it. It doesn't seem like there's any real reason for that. It seems completely arbitrary. So yeah, I don't think he's a good decision maker. I think he's impulsive. I think he gives in to his, again, like you said, his human, kind of his mortal desires, and that's not what a good leader should do. They should be above that. They should sacrifice themselves and their own needs or whatever for the needs of the people and everything, and the multitude, and that goes into the whole notion of how how kings or leaders, the body, two bodies, the two body notion that Ernst Kantorowicz, who was talking about when he's a writer who muses on medieval political theology, in the sense that medieval kings, they had two bodies. They had a body natural, their natural, normal, corporeal body, and then they had their body politic, the people who they support them, the supporters, everyone around them, the people, right? And Richard II, he loses both of those because he cares more about his natural body than he does the body politic, and that's where he sets himself up for defeat. And I would say, yes, he is much more bad than he is good, because he's a useless leader, a selfish individual, and just, I have no sympathy for him by the end. I don't care about him. I don't feel bad for him in the least. Did you feel bad for him when he was in prison? Because I didn't. I thought it was all his own. It's his fault. It's like no one else made you do this. This is because of you. How'd you feel about that? Did you have sympathy for him by the very end?
I don't know. It's just he deserved all of the things that had happened to him because it's his fault. I don't know. He doesn't even think about what would happen that it would happen to him. So maybe I don't know. I don't care about that all about him. He deserved everything. I don't know. That's uh that's a writing that would happen to him because of his decisions, the wrong decision that he made, that being too impulsive or being selfish.
What do you think? What do you think? So now let me ask you this: what do you think the significance of Richard breaking the mirror was during that scene where he smashes the mirror when he looks at himself, and then he breaks it? What do you think the point of that was?
Maybe it's just how he see himself. But maybe um maybe he's thinking about his the physical self, I guess, because he's so indulgent into some to pleasure, I guess, not exact pleasure, about uh, the expensive stuffs, I guess, that he's most of the times that he doesn't care about his being a king, or he's thinking about more personal desires. So maybe that's it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree with parts of that, but I agree more with and this isn't my interpretation, but this is somebody else's. It says here that it's supposed to be emblematic of his releasing, his relinquishment of his identity as king. He's no longer a king. The second he smashes that mirror, he is no longer a king, because he's gotten rid of his body politic, that aspect of him, the king's two bodies. He's let go of the body politic, and now he's retired himself to his natural body, so that he can wallow in misery and self pity and grief and everything. And that's one of his other downfalls too, is that he's very self pitying. He's very unlikable, I think, and in all aspects he's very unlikable. He sits there and he wallows and he feels sorry for himself, and it's just he's very dramatic, over dramatic, and just unpleasant, and he set himself up for disaster. He's a complete failure through and through, all around. There's no redeeming qualities to his personality, to his character. He's complicated, but he's complicated in all the wrong ways, if that makes sense. Like none of his complications are positives. None of them are virtues. He's all bad. The only thing that's complex about him is just how bad he is, exactly. And how much of a failure he is, not only as a king, but as an individual, as a person. As a king, he's a terrible leader, and then as a person, he's just a self-pitying, selfish, prick. And when he smashes that mirror, he finally lets go of his quote unquote noble rights and all that, and he moves on. Moves on to just feeling sorry for himself, and that's it. And that's really that's when he dies his death as a king. That's when he dies. He dies the second he smashes himself, the mirror to bits. And yeah, he died long before he actually does get stabbed in the end. So that's what I think the significance of the mirror smashing scene is. Now let me ask you this, Simone. Do you believe in the divine right of kings, which essentially, and if you don't know, for both the listeners and yourself, what this essentially posits, the divine right of kings, is that God has selected certain individuals to rule at the top of a hierarchy, in a monarchy. Because of this, kings and queens have divine authority and do not need to answer to an earthly authority like a senate or a parliament, and can assume absolute supreme rule over their subjects. Do you agree with that notion, or no? And why?
No, I don't agree with that because knowing that, just like in the story portrayed that um, his cousin, I forgot his name, get his throne because he plans for it to get in the throne. He did something bad just to get there. I don't know. I don't know. You can just be there by the soul of believing in God that will put you there. Maybe you should do something to get there, not exactly just by relying on the divine guidance at all. Maybe you should do something, but most of the time you can get there by just doing a good thing. Maybe just like in the how flawed the government is, that you should do something bad at all to get there. Most of the times, that it's the reality that you need to get a certain power. You need to do something bad. So I don't believe that the divine guidance has significance at all into this. Maybe in some parts it's great because the church has a great role in the society or back then. So I don't agree that it's all in the divine guidance.
Right. Yeah. And I wouldn't either, but I just, we got to go over it because it's part of the whole thing. So figured we'd talk about it. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, it needs to be a meritocracy. The leader needs to be the person who's best fit for the job, the candidate who can who can perform the most well, I suppose. Someone who's good of character, someone who's a decent person, and however they demonstrate that, that's all up for debate, right? How can you really tell if someone's an actual, like, genuinely good moral person or whatever? Is it because they're religious? Is it because they follow a certain religion? Is it because they donate a lot of money to charities? Is it because they shake hands and smile and all that? What exactly tells people that you're, how do you prove to people that you're a good person? How can you trust someone's perceived goodliness or whatever? Anyway, but it's all of that. But yeah, obviously we live in a meritocracy now. But there are still plenty of. I mean, like, this divine right of kings is definitely, like, it's all still there. It's not necessarily in the same form, but there is this whole no. There are dynasties still. There are people. I mean, England is still. I mean, it's not really. It's in a name only. It's more of a formality than anything else. I mean, they have no real power. That all goes to the PM and everything. Boris Johnson right now, but I mean, Boris Johnson has way more power than Queen Elizabeth II, for instance. But yeah, I mean, I just, it's just what it comes down to, really, at the end of the day, is people wanting to keep their power. The divine right of kings is just a justification for keeping power, for the maintenance of power, keeping the power within the family and everything, making sure that for generations to come, it's only Henry's or what it's only one family, one line through and through, and it's obviously it doesn't work. It leads to inbred, it leads to inbreeding, it leads to mental illness, it leads to a bunch of people who really, they have no real reason to be in power, but they just kind of are for whatever reason, and it's like, well, that's why shit happens. It's like they're educated, sure, when you're born into those kinds of circumstances, like you get education, but it's like, what if everyone was educated? I'm sure there'd be hundreds of better candidates for the job than you. Just because you're born into a certain line, just because you're part of a certain family, doesn't mean that you're going to be a great leader. Obviously, it's false, but back in those days, it didn't really matter because no one was really there to oppose it. The regular people were largely uneducated, largely just working for a living, just doing what they could to survive, to get by. They had no idea what was going on up in the courts and everything. This is all stuff that we can only comment on now that it's happened, hundreds of years later, hundreds of years, in the past or whatever. It's like we've got all that time behind us. We can talk about it objectively. But it might seem so obvious to us that it's practically invisible, that we take this kind of knowledge for granted, but it's important to muse on it every now and then, just so we can be a bit more appreciative, and so we can fully understand what we're talking about. Like, we have education, we have resources, we have the means through which to self-determinate and to inform ourselves on things, on these things, especially these kinds of things. So it's good to take a moment every once in a while to reflect on that and to exercise that right to knowledge and everything and awareness, and so that's why I brought that up. I just think it's important. But now to close, because this has been going on for quite a while, and this isn't really a play that I enjoyed, so I don't really want to talk about it much longer. Kind of disappointing, but I mean, I'm still bored. Like, I still feel bored just talking about it. That's what sucks about it. It's like I wish that it was better, because there are interesting ideas here, and there is insight to be had, but it's just not enough. But we've bitched about that long enough. Simone, tell me this: what did you think the 2013? Well, do you think the 2013 production made the play's ending better or worse by changing Richard's killer from some random nobleman named Exton to Richard's formerly loyal cousin, the Duke of Armel? Do you think do you think it was better or worse for them to do that, to change it from Exton to Armel?
At some point, I think it's better, I guess, because they wanted to portray something that about betrayal of trust. I think that's what they're trying to portray, but the play itself doesn't appeal to me that much at all. There's some parts, this is like you said, that the pieces are all there, but it doesn't connect at all at each other. So maybe I agree that it's better that way, but I'm looking for a more introspection regarding that matter.
What yeah. Oh god. Yeah, because I mean, Armel was, they spent the whole production trying to set him up as like the, kind of Richard's right hand man, the person that's he's always kind of confiding in, the person who's like right by his side through and through. They're cousins, they're like best buds or whatever, but his closest ally, and then to have him kill him at the very end, it really does drive home that whole notion of Richard II being a Christ-like figure, in the sense that he's constantly being betrayed by the God, what's his name, the guy who sells out Jesus, whatever his name is. God, I can't think of it right now.
Peter?
What was that?
Peter.
No, it's not Peter. It's Judas. Judas. Yeah, Judas is the great betrayer and everything. Who in Dante's Inferno is at the very bottom of hell, because he's at the deepest layer of hell, because betrayal is the worst thing that you can do. It's the greatest sin a human can commit, according to Dante and a lot of other those older kind of thinkers. But yeah. So, one of those, he's supposed to be a Christ-like figure who gets betrayed by the Judases of the world, and then also gets persecuted by the Pontius, Pilates of the world as well. And Pilate was, of course, the Roman who had Jesus sentenced to death and all that. But, I thought it was very... I was actually like I don't know when the moment came before I even knew about all of this, before I knew that it was even that it was different from how it was in the play. I wasn't really that surprised. I was like, oh, huh, like it didn't have the impact that they were trying to go for. Even before I knew that it was made up anyway, that the production put that there without it being in the actual play itself. I thought it was kind of lame. It didn't really it didn't come home as it didn't drive home anything as much as it should have. It wasn't as effective. It wasn't as impactful. Um, yeah, and well, for me, it makes the 2013 production worse because it doesn't it changes the original story, and it's like for no good reason. There's not enough justification. Again, like I said, it's like if you're going to change something, make sure that there's an actual point to it, and that was not effective, and I didn't think there was a point to it. Um, so so do you think? I guess before we close out, I was going to ask you if you thought Henry the Fourth was sincere, because at the very end he says he's going to go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to absolve himself of the sins of having kind of inadvertently killed Richard II. I was going to ask you if you thought he was being honest when he said that he was going to do that, but I'm not going to ask you that because he wasn't. They proved that it wasn't in the next plays and everything. They confirmed that he never actually goes on that pilgrimage, and that's just a way for him to show that he's pious, much like that falls into the whole Machiavellian philosophy of putting on a certain kind of image and appealing to the people, winning over your body politic, compromising and pretending to be something so that people give you their support. And that's part of it, is pretending to be pious and virtuous and everything, and showing that you are, quote unquote, quote unquote, faithful to the religion and everything, or dedicated to the faith and all that, blah, blah, blah. But let me ask you this though, Simone, do you think that Henry IV was a good leader? We've already agreed that Richard II wasn't a good leader, but do you think Henry IV is a good leader? And do you think he will be a good leader in the next plays to come?
I don't think so that he will be a great leader. No, but that in the end that he didn't show any regret for what happened, or he didn't care at all of what happened. He could just get the throne, and then that's it. And I can feel his character at all that he will change something in the place that they're reigning or something. I
Well,
can't see any thing about him that he would be any progress at all. I don't know.
well, he's definitely good at acquiring power. That's one thing. He's good at playing the political game. So that I think that would make him a good leader in that sense. But we haven't seen enough of him to really tell. I mean, that's for his own play and everything, or plays. But he's clearly not a moral person. He's ruthless. He doesn't give a shit. He's just there to get power and to exhume, and I guess to eventually enforce power, right? And to enforce his will upon the people and everything, and to do what he wants, basically. But I don't know. Some people would argue that that makes you a good leader. Being able to do things without worrying about morality. The morality of it, without getting caught up on that. Just being a straight up kind of like a sociopath, and just going in and doing what you want and playing this game and appealing to the people and everything. You don't think that would make him an effective leader?
I think I don't know if it's okay if it change my mind. Maybe it's a great. I think it's also a great aspect of is that he has this particular thing. Maybe it could help the country, given that the Battle of the Roses. Am I right to use the term that it's about to happen? So I think it's a good trait of him that it could lead the country to a better situation.
Okay, yeah, and I would agree with that maybe, but we'll see. I think Shakespeare's setting up more tragedy and disaster, to come with the whole Wars of the Roses and everything. It's like it's going to be a very it's going to be a very catastrophic, tumultuous event. You can already tell that's what he's setting up. So I think Henry's immorality or whatever is going to come to bite him come to bite him in the ass in the end. I think ultimately his ruthlessness is going to be his downfall. I think that's what he's setting up for that particular king. But yeah. Uh, lastly, I want to know. Well, first of all, what do you think Richard II could have done differently in order to have avoided all of this from happening? Do you think there's any decision he could have made that would have prevented everything from turning out the way it did in the end?
Maybe having his own decisions. Most of the time, it seems that he's just listening to his advisors behind. Um, I don't know if they didn't give that much significance about the advisor at all. They're just there whispering and talking to him in the background. So maybe that's it. Maybe he should made his own decisions, or maybe educate himself, because he's given that he's a king. So maybe to be a better ruler.
Yeah, to think for himself, exactly. Yeah, and they didn't really place a lot of emphasis on the advisors, which was a bit of a shame because I would have wanted to know what the intrigue was, and that's the problem with this production, and I think the play in general too. It's like you could focus on the advisors, you could focus on that, but it's like they only give you a peek, and it feels like they're just like teasing you with it, but they never like get into the details of it. It's like they never actually explore what they have in front of them, like their interesting materials, the interesting aspects of this whole thing. And it just feels like such a waste. I don't know. It's like, why even limit yourself that way? Like, why even bring it up at all if you're not going to explore it? I don't know. But yeah, I would agree. He needed to have a little more autonomy. I mean, he was in control. I mean, he was the absolute authority. Then he could have made his own decisions. He didn't have to advise. He didn't have to rely so heavily upon his advisors, in order to do everything. Um, yeah, definitely. He should have been much more decisive and assertive as a king. But who do you think was right in the situation at the end of the day? Who do you think was wrong? Who was most at fault for what eventually unfolds by the end? Was it Henry IV? Was it Richard II? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I think it's Richard II at all. He's the main reason of it. He got in the throne about. I just read that he became the king at the age of 10, and he has a choice. He has the authority to educate himself, but he didn't did it. So he just let his advisor or his impulses rule over his um, being a king, and maybe it's all his fault. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of chances, and his authority, he could use it better to for the betterment of himself and also the place where he rules. So I think it's all his fault.
Yeah, I think that's pretty unambiguously correct. Yes, I would say that he is the number one contender for worst defender in this case. He fucks up. He fucked up everything. It's just it's all his. None of this would have happened if he had actually been a good, competent leader, but he wasn't, and so there you have it. And now it's gonna lead to this like generation spanning mess. This war and everything, and it's all because of him. All because of this one useless, lazy sack of shit. Basically, it's all because of him. And yeah, it's definitely Richard II. Um, but so now that we've discussed all of this a little more, what would you say that your rating has changed at all from how it was at the beginning?
Maybe I give it a 7.5, I guess. I don't know. It just made me think about. It doesn't leave that much me, and then it gave me a reason to search for something, or made me realize, or talk to myself at all, or articulate my thoughts on why it doesn't appeal to me. So that's the reason why I'll give it a 7.5.
Okay. So you think the failures are just as important as the successes then, because then they help you like articulate what it is about a bad piece of art or whatever, like a not necessarily a bad one, but like a lackluster piece of art as opposed to like a really good successful one. It helps you distinguish the differences between both and like articulate your feelings regarding both, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Because yeah, you do need to know why something doesn't work. You do need to know why you don't like something. That's just as important, if not more important. Because I think personally, it's harder to talk about why you don't like something as opposed to why you do like something. Because when you like something, you're already naturally predisposed to talk about it. Like it's already kind of gushing out of you. You know, you already want to go like, well, this was great. This part was great. These characters were really interesting. I like the setting. It's all awesome. You can do that all day, but then when it comes down to like why something doesn't work, why something isn't as effective as it could be, it's a little more complicated. And then you learn more from that. Though that's more productive because it forces you to parse. It forces you to get into the construction of things. You have to talk about storytelling. You have to talk about narrative. You have to talk about characterization. You have to talk about intent. Authorial intent and everything. You have to get into the process itself, and so then by doing so, you familiarize yourself with it, and you come out the other end a lot more well informed than you were coming in, I suppose. So that is definitely true. There is something to be said about that. I just wish that this play wasn't so goddamn boring. That's really the thing that bothers me is that I'm still bored. Like we're talking about it, and I'm still bored. Like I can't shake the boredom. Like I'm not even that tired, but I want to like turn over and go to sleep right now. I want to go to bed just talking about this. It makes me yawn on the inside. But yeah, I don't know, man. Personally, I've kind of done this kind of exercise where I explore lackluster things. So it might be new to you. So that's good. This is a good like way for you to get familiarized with that aspect of criticism and review and everything. It's just that I've done this with other things that were even more interesting. That were more interesting than this. This one's just straight up boring to me, and I don't think there's anything that can really account for boredom. It's like we've already kind of gone through what was wrong with it, the problems, but at the end of the day, the boredom is just like really like you can't really even talk about it. It's so subjective. It's very difficult to articulate that aspect of it. But I think for the reasons we've already outlined, it is just a really boring play because it's more focused on the construction and it doesn't come together to make something that's interesting or entertaining or whatever. It's more about how impressive it was that Shakespeare, basically wrote a different character for Richard at different scenes using language. He would express different things through different kinds of language, and it was all very impressive and yada yada this, yada yada that. But it's like I don't care. I still don't care. I don't even care now that I know that what went behind what the processes were behind making all of this. I can't appreciate it. I don't want to teach myself how to appreciate it. I just don't care. The subject matter isn't engaging enough for me to do so. And that's really the biggest takeaway I had from this. So before we do our typical would you rather question to end the episode, are there any closing remarks that you'd like to make, Simone? I'll give you the time now to make them if you want.
I don't know. It made me think about things or articulate why didn't I like it. So in the end of the day, like this is it's boring. And after I discover what are the things that I didn't like about it, and it just give me a reason to get bored about it, or just maybe just let it in the air or something that it doesn't impart something on me. I discover things about it behind why things that I don't understand or I don't really like about it, but I don't know, it just doesn't appeal or oh okay I know it and then that's all, and then that's it. That's the end of it, and it doesn't ask me to do more research or something. I'm just bored to get to gather this idea. I don't know. It isn't something that will impart on you or make you something more. Just like in the Hamlet or other plays that I just watched.
Right, yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know.
It doesn't stay with you. Yeah.
It doesn't. It's just boring.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so boring while watching it, and then I don't know, diving into the uh, doing some research. I don't know.
Um
It's
yeah, yeah. But So after watching this, are you still willing to watch all of the Shakespeare? Like, do you still want to watch like every single Shakespeare after this one, or has this kind of made you question that ambition?
Uh, it doesn't maybe give me a reason to stop looking for more Shakespeare. I guess that it just give me it justified that just Shakespeare is just like any other artist that he doesn't he also has shortcomings or things that he's not good or something. Not all his works are that great or it just he's just like any other artist that it doesn't that constant that his works are all great. That's all. I'm looking forward for something more great than this.
Yeah, I think we'll watch a comedy next, just to not only kind of light. I mean, it's not like this stuff's like super. I mean, I guess it's dark, but it's not. It's like it's too old for it to be like dark, you know. But I think we'll watch a comedy next because those are more entertaining, and you know, that's the one we'll do next. How about the histories though? Are you still willing to watch all of the histories so that you can get this full story about the Wars of the Roses and the Henriade and everything else? Like, has this one discouraged you from doing that, or are you still willing to go through with it?
Maybe it's better if I just did it from the start rather than watch this. I guess I don't know. Maybe it's also important that I just watch this because if I didn't watch this, I didn't have the idea to search for the history behind it or the real history, not just this play something.
Yeah, but not the real history. I mean, like, because Shakespeare's histories, like the historical plays, like, are you still willing to watch all of the other like plays in the series to get the full story, or is this like affected the way you think about it now to the point where you don't want to do that as much? Because we have to do that eventually if we're going to watch the entire, if we're going to experience the entire like Shakespearean canon. So, I mean, how do you feel about that particular aspect of that goal? You know, are you not looking forward to it? Are you dreading it now because this one was kind of boring, or like how do you feel about it?
Maybe I think it gave me a reason to look forward for more. I guess that maybe this one is not good. Maybe the next one will be better than this. So it gave me a reason to look forward for more.
So you're optimistic
That
about it then?
yes, I guess that it's Shakespeare in the end of the day. So maybe yeah, the other series would be better than this.
So even so you think even the bad Shakespeare is productive at the end of the day?
Um, I don't know. It works for me. It's just my first time to get exposed to this, so maybe I need to be optimistic about things rather than be discouraged.
Right, yeah, because if you're discouraged, you probably won't end up doing it. Makes sense, makes sense. Yeah, I would agree pretty much. Yeah, so this is just another episode where we agree every single time, but that's all right. You know, we'll get into a little more later, but yeah, let's do the would you rather now. So answer me this, Simone. Would you rather have a golden voice or a silver tongue? And what that means, by the way, a golden voice. So like a golden voice is like a really you can sing really well and everything, and like you're very like you sing well, but then a silver tongue is like you're good at manipulating people. I guess like you can convince people to do what you tell them to. You're charismatic. You know, which one would you pick? Would you rather be able to sing really well or to persuade very well?
I guess I maybe just
Golden voice or silver tongue?
a golden voice. I guess I like to have a silver tongue, but I don't know. It's complicated to have a silver tongue.
Why is it
So
complicated
maybe
to have a silver tongue? Do you think?
you have a silver tongue, so maybe there's an it will urge you to interact more with people and persuade them. So maybe not all people you can please everyone. So yeah, that's it. That it would be complicated.
Yeah, but if you have a silver tongue, you can though. Like that's kind of the it's like a power, you know. It's like you get that ability to do that, so you can make anybody like you really. Um, well, what if that? Like, what if you could? What if you were guaranteed to make everyone you meet like you without any sort of exception or you know restriction to the rule or anything? What if that was the case? Would you go with the silver tongue then?
No, I won't. I would go with the silver tongue. Maybe um, you need some bad experiences to grow, not just all the good things. It will not enable you to grow as an individual. I guess that's my
So
perspective.
right, so it wouldn't give you any perspective. It wouldn't develop your character enough to just have everything handed to you. It would be too much of a shortcut for you to want to take because you want to do things the hard way so you can have the more substantive, meaningful development. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, that's what's happening right now.
Okay, okay. Yeah, but yeah, I would go with the silver tongue. I don't know what I would use a golden voice for other than singing, and I don't want to be like a sing. I wouldn't want to be like a singer. I don't know. They don't get paid enough, and if they, well, I guess if you're a good singer, you get paid a lot. But like, still, that comes with fame and everything. I think the golden voice is more complicated than the silver tongue somehow. I mean, maybe it's not more complicated, but it's complicated in a way that I don't like. I wouldn't want to have to be like an album. I wouldn't want to have to do like platinum albums and all. I wouldn't want to be a singer. I wouldn't want to enter the singing world or whatever, or like the musician world, the artist world. The musical artist world or whatever. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go on tour. I don't want to do any of that shit. I just kind of want to chill. That's not for me personally. That's just a subjective thing. I would rather have the silver tongue and just go around and like I'd use it to get laid. I would pick any woman, come up to any woman or whatever, just sweet talk them, and then you have the silver tongue, so it works every single time. That's what I would do. I would take that. I would go to people. I would go to the bank and ask for like loans that I don't have, and they would give it to me. I would take it. I would take the easy route, but I would have control about it. I think I would try to be balanced with it. I would only use it for I don't know, maybe like every Saturday I go out and have fun and just do whatever the fuck I want with the silver tongue. It's like right now it's COVID. So like I would go to the airport on a Saturday and get the people behind the I don't know, I'd get like a free ticket to Ireland or something, go to Ireland and just spend the whole day going through Ireland, going to like all the stores and stuff, and like getting people to like give me things, and then like going up to some cabin and like telling the person who lives in the cabin to like give me the keys to it and leave so that I can have your cabin for like a weekend or something. I just there's so much you can do. It's a whole world of possibility, and I would be controlled about it. I would control it by only doing it once a week. I would save Saturday as my silver tongue day, and then I would just kind of turn it off every other day of the week. That's how I would approach it. But yeah. Is there anything you want to say to that before we end?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have use for the golden voice at all. So maybe I just use it to court some girl or something.
Yeah.
No, it's just that's the only thing that I could use is that there's a lot of singers right now. So maybe I don't have any break over singing or something. Maybe I just stay the way I am.
So you pick neither.
Yeah, I don't know. Things are too complicated.
Yeah, they both do. They are both quite the Pandora's box in their own respects. But anyway, that brings us to the end of episode 6 of the Imperial Tides podcast. If you enjoyed, please do remember to give a thumbs up, subscribe for more content. We upload new videos every week. Share with all your friends so that we can get more views and whatnot. And if you want to argue with anything we said, if you want to debate us in the comment section, feel free. You're more than welcome to. But yeah, stay tuned for more. We're probably going to focus on Shakespeare for a while, just because we have this goal on the channel of getting through every single Shakespeare play ever written, and then also the sonnets and stuff too. Like, we want to just do Shakespeare. We want to eventually get to the point where we do all of Shakespeare. So that's probably going to be where the channel's focused for a while. We will probably take breaks somewhere in between, and when we take the breaks, we'll probably focus on other literary adaptations, like maybe like the works of Nathaniel Hawthorne or like Virginia Woolf or Charles Dickens, Mark Twain. We've got a whole program set up, so it's all, there's a lot to look forward to, a whole catalog of things to cover. So stay tuned for all of that. But for now, I guess look forward especially to Shakespeare stuff. We will do solo reviews. I know I haven't gotten any of my solo reviews yet, but it's just a matter of time, I guess. But Simone's been pretty good with his, so look forward to more of those and everything. Yeah, not much else to say. Hope you guys enjoyed, and see you in the next one. Take care. Have a nice rest of your day, and bye for now.